The story begins in the realm of the dead, called Necropia. It is a place with no life, yet there is a huge castle standing tall in the empty, barren land. Inside this castle, unimaginable things exist. There are endless golden pillars, beautiful decorations, and detailed murals. The marble floor stretches out beneath magnificent sculptures. At the center of it all is a symbol of great power, the ruler of Necropia, the Death King, Karnak. Karnak is someone who has gone beyond human limits and gained control over death itself. But after 100 years of ruling, he realized that humans were not meant to control death. In his earlier days, Karnak was born into a fallen noble family as an unwanted child. He lost his mother when he was young and was mistreated by the other nobles. This made him trust only himself and train his body to earn respect. One day, Karnak discovered an ancient book on necromancy, the magic of controlling the dead, and chose a different path from humanity. He used his newfound power to bring death to every person in the kingdom. Even the fourth martial king and the 3 great mages tried to stop him, but it was useless. He turned them into his loyal followers. Even the guardians of the world couldn't stop him. Karnak eventually transformed the last guardian, the dragon emperor Grateria, into his servant. After this, he altered his own body and became Astra, the most powerful death king to ever exist. 70 years have passed since then, and Karnak feels empty. He thought he had everything, but now he wonders what he can do with a body made only of bones. He longs for the warmth of the living world and even wishes for the pain of being alive. However, he hasn't given up. He has a bigger plan in mind, something that could change everything. As he reflects on this, footsteps approach, and a man named Baros, the head commander of the Legions of Death, enters. Karnak tells him that the preparations are complete, and Baros asks if it's finally time for their plan to begin. Karnak laughs and says, "Yes, I have a good feeling about this." Baros becomes really excited, and Karnak explains that he's been searching for a way to regain the pleasures of having a physical body, with Baros's help. Karnak tried things like vampirism and possession, but nothing worked. Pleasures are meant to satisfy what someone lacks, and since they have become so powerful and ascended beyond humans, no method could meet their needs. However, because they are the ultimate beings, there must be a way to recover their pleasure. Karnak explains that they can't enjoy human pleasures anymore because they're not human. To fix this, Karnak says he must go back in time, to when he was still human. He plans to return to the moment when he first gained the mana of darkness. Baros asks what will happen if they fail. He wonders if their existence will disappear. Karnak brushes it off, asking Baros why it matters. He asks if Baros has any regrets in this life. Karnak adds that if Baros does have regrets, he will leave him behind. Baros laughs and says he has no regrets. "It's all or nothing. Let's do this," Baros says. Both of them place their hands on the stone tablet in front of them, ready to go back in time. Karnak starts thinking about his life as a human. Slowly, he opens his eyes to see a blonde-haired man standing over him, asking him to wake up. The man asks if Karnak is awake now. Karnak looks at him and recognizes the face. "Baros, is that you?" Karnak asks. Baros replies, "Yes, it's been a while since I've seen your face. Your scrawny, arrogant face looks just like it did in the past." Karnak smirks and says Baros still has no respect. He stands up and looks around, confirming they have arrived at the right time. This is when he first gained the mana of darkness. He glances at a table and confirms that this was the start of everything. His journey into necromancy began with this very codex. Karnak decides to test his power. He snaps his fingers, and a purple aura extends from his hand, setting the book on fire. Baros asks if it's really okay to burn the codex, and Karnak replies, "Yes, I remember everything anyway." Karnak explains that although the codex is forbidden, it's not that important. It just contains the basics. He says it's better to destroy it than risk someone else finding it. Baros nods and says Karnak seems to have thought everything through. Karnak looks pleased. Baros then comments, half-jokingly, that Karnak looks more handsome than usual. Karnak stares at him, and there's an awkward silence for a moment, until Karnak's stomach growls loudly. Karnak says he hasn't heard that sound in ages, and Baros laughs, saying it means he's hungry. As they leave the cave, Karnak suggests they go find something to eat. Both of them are excited, realizing that now that they've become human again, they can finally enjoy food. The scene jumps to a tavern, where Barrows is loudly praising the food. He holds up a piece of barley bread and exclaims, "What did they make this with? It's amazing! I can taste things again, and everything is so clear." Other customers in the inn glance at him, a bit concerned, while Barrows cries tears of joy, eating the bread. Suddenly he shouts, "This is so good, I could die for it." Karnak, also overwhelmed with emotion, laughs and says, "Hey, no dying, remember? I revived us for a reason." Barrows, still crying, agrees and says that risking their lives for this was worth it. "The taste is so good, I can't stop crying," he says, wiping his eyes. Karnak, also emotional, tells Barrows he understands how he feels but warns him not to eat too much, as they don't have a lot of money. "Money doesn't fall from the sky, you know," Karnak reminds him. At a nearby table, the waiter sets down a whole roasted chicken. Both Karnak and Barrows instinctively turn to look, their eyes widening at the sight. Karnak stares at the chicken in awe and says, "There's no way we can afford that. I come from a fallen noble family, remember?" Karnak briefly considers doing something drastic, killing everyone at the table to steal their food, but Barrows is shocked by the idea. He quickly tells Karnak to calm down, reminding him that in their current, weaker bodies, they'd probably get beaten up if they tried anything like that. Karnak pauses and realizes Barrows is probably right. Barrows sighs and mutters, "Being poor really is a sin." He then opens their bag of money and gasps in shock. "There's a problem," Barrows says, looking at Karnak with wide eyes. Karnak, confused, asks, "What's wrong?" Barrows replies, "It looks like our time travel messed with a few things." Karnak frowns, saying, "This is definitely strange." Barrows agrees, adding, "Yeah, there's no way we should have this much money." Karnak begins to wonder where things might have gone wrong. He recalls that his family, the Gestured family, was in a terrible financial situation at the time. His grandfather, Baron Grailed, had started numerous businesses using their land as collateral, but every single venture failed, leaving only debts for Karnak's father, Baron Croppet. Unfortunately, his father was unable to manage the increasing debt, and his two sons from his first wife were useless, unable to help the family at all. Karnak, as the bastard child born into a collapsing family, received all of the family's scorn and persecution, barely surviving each day. At least, that's how things should have been. Now, he's genuinely confused as to where all this money came from. "This isn't something to be happy about," Karnak says, thinking that maybe their time regression spell didn't work as expected. Barrows, equally confused, says, "I wouldn't know. I'm just a swordsman." Karnak scratches his head, considering the possibility that they didn't return to the exact past. "But things are so similar to my memories," he mutters. Barrows, catching a whiff of the delicious aroma, says, "Well, if that's the case, does it really matter? We can still eat the chicken. I've been going crazy from the smell since we got here." Their mood shifts and Karnak agrees. "It's not like our worries will vanish if we don't spend this money. We have to eat well to handle our concerns," he says. Barrows grins and suggests they order at least one chicken. Karnak, more enthusiastic now, responds, "Hell no, we're getting one each." They excitedly ask the waiter for 2 whole chickens. Later that afternoon, Barrows is lying on his back, bloated from overeating, looking almost pig-like. "I'm about to fall into a food coma," he groans. Karnak, feeling equally stuffed, says they should head back and sleep. Barrows, still dazed, jokes, "The thought of seeing the family again is kind of annoying. They're probably the same as always, and I hate that." Karnak reassures him, "We'll be fine as long as we don't grovel to them. I'm not the helpless kid I was back then." But he admits, the real problem is how strange this situation is. Barrows nods in agreement, adding, "Yeah, it's not just 1 or 2 things that are off. Everything feels a little weird." Barrows comments that even the horse seems strange, mentioning how the stable manager was unusually respectful, almost fawning over them. "And it makes no sense that a fallen family would have horses of such a high breed," Barrows adds. Despite that, he handed the stable manager some money, appreciating his hard work. Barrows also points out that the citizens they encountered earlier, who would usually bark at them or treat them poorly, had been surprisingly kind and polite. Karnak sighs, feeling uneasy. Something is definitely off, he says. Barrows, trying to stay calm, reassures him, we'll figure it out once we get home. As they approach Karnak's family estate, Karnak looks at it and feels a wave of nostalgia. I haven't seen this place in so long, he says. Barrows, however, remains irritated, saying, I don't have good memories here. We learn that Barrows was an orphan who didn't have an easy life. His parents were terrible people who abandoned him in the middle of the night when he was just a child. Karnak found him, starving and alone on the streets. Despite being an illegitimate child himself, Karnak convinced his family to take Barrows in, and his father allowed it, though Barrows was only accepted as a servant to maintain the family's reputation. Barrows snaps Karnak out of his thoughts, pointing ahead and asking, is that really the gestured residence? Karnak replies, of course it is, but even he is surprised by what they see. The estate is fancier than he remembers. Barrows, shocked, asks, are we sure we're at the right place? But Karnak insists, yes, it's exactly the same as my memories. The tall brick wall, the two-story building with a terrace, and the large garden that surrounds it, it all matches his past. However, the estate is now incredibly well-maintained and looks far cleaner and richer than he remembered. They've really spruced it up, Karnak mutters, confused. Karnak wonders where his family got the money to afford this sudden change in appearance. Just then, one of the guards at the gate calls out to Karnak, addressing him as young master. Karnak is taken aback by the warm greeting, especially since the family had never treated him with much respect before. Another guard quickly corrects the first one, saying, that's not how we should address him anymore, and they both bow deeply, calling him my lord. Karnak and Barrows exchange bewildered looks, completely shocked by how much has changed. They wonder what in the world has happened. Later, they sit down for tea with a man who casually mentions, it's already been half a year since you became the head of the family, as he pours them tea. At that moment, both Karnak and Barrows are puzzled by what they're hearing. The butler, a man named Jappelplade, asks Karnak if he achieved his goal. Karnak, confused, hesitates and asks, what goal? Jappel smiles and replies, surely, that's why you went on your journey. Still unsure, Karnak responds vaguely, yes, sort of. Jappel beams, saying, the late lord and lady would have been so proud. Karnak is taken aback. He didn't know his father and stepmother had passed away. He also learns that his two younger brothers have also perished. Jappel, still cheerful, expresses his relief, saying, it's comforting to know that the family is in good hands now. Suddenly, it all clicks for Karnak. This is why he has become the head of the family. But he's left wondering how and why his entire family died. As he thinks it over, the purpose of his supposed journey becomes clear. It must have been to master necromancy while everyone else was distracted. Barrows leans in and whispers in Karnak's ear, it's strange, you wouldn't have revealed your true goal like that, right? Karnak, nodding slightly, says, that must be why I made up some nonsense about going on a journey. But why would I need necromancy in a situation like this? Jappel interrupts their thoughts with a bright tone, asking, is something troubling you? Barrows quickly steps in and explains that Karnak is just tired from his long journey and suggests they discuss everything tomorrow. Jappel, apologizing, says, I'm sorry, I should have considered that. Please rest in your room. With that, Jappel leaves. Once the butler is out of sight, Karnak and Barrows quietly celebrate by high-fiving, impressed by their acting skills. He totally believed us, Barrows whispers. As they walk down the hallway, Barrows remarks, we managed to get through that, but we'll have to deal with everything eventually. And honestly, all this new information is overwhelming. I have no idea what's going on anymore. Karnak, with a knowing look, says, there's a good method for situations like this. Barrows, catching on, responds, I think I know what you're planning. Karnak smirks and adds, you know what we need to prepare for now, right? He hints that they should act while everyone is asleep. Let's hurry and move while we have the chance. Karnak says, determined to figure out what's really happening. In the dead of night, with Japal fast asleep, Karnak and Barrows quietly enter his room. Barrows whispers, he's completely out of it, and hands over some herbs to Karnak, saying, "It took me a while to get these." Karnak nods, then says, "It's time to commence the mind inspection." He pours his aura into a bowl, igniting a black-purple flame that begins to seep into Japal's nose. As the magic takes hold, Karnak commands, "Awaken, my servant." Japal's eyes snap open, and he responds instantly, "Yes, master." Karnak wastes no time and asks, "Explain how the Jestard family's finances improved, and how I became the head of the household." Japal, now under Karnak's control, begins to explain. 4 years ago, while the second young master was training, he stumbled upon a large-scale copper mine. Karnak raises an eyebrow, skeptical. "Mines? I always thought nobles used the excuse of finding mines to hide dirty money." Barrows chuckles softly, adding, "I guess this was one of those rare times when they actually did discover a mine." Karnak, still puzzled, asks, "How did my entire family die?" Japal continues, "The problem was the location of the copper mine. It was situated in a neutrality zone between the Jestard family and the Deventer family. Both families claimed the mine as their own, and this sparked a war between them." Karnak listens intently as Japal goes on. The Deventer family had always been strict with their military training, and they were too powerful. Sir Randolph, their best knight, was unstoppable. He easily slew Baron Croppet in battle and killed young Master Tessel, the eldest son of the Jestard family. Our household's strongest knight and the second young master, Ferulf, lost both his legs to Sir Randolph. Despondent over his injuries, Ferulf took his own life. The Baroness, devastated by all this loss, passed away not long after. Karnak's expression hardens as he absorbs the tragic tale. "So that's how they all died." Japal nods and continues, "With no other options, the family chose you, young Master Karnak, to be the successor, even though you were still a minor at the time. The two families agreed to a ceasefire until you came of age and could officially take over as head of the household." Karnak begins to see how things unfolded but asks, "And what happened to the copper mine and the war compensation?" Japal explains, "That was when you came up with a solution. You requested a trial duel against Viscount Deventer, invoking the name of Allium, the goddess of the moon and justice." Karnak is stunned by the revelation that he himself had issued a challenge for a trial duel, something he had no memory of. Barrows, equally surprised, exclaims, "That's rash as hell." He explains that the trial duel, conducted under the mandates of the Allium Order, is a life-or-death contest. "You can substitute a warrior in your place," Barrows continues, "but it's overseen by an Allium priest, and victory is only declared when one side dies." Barrows sighs, "You really dug your own grave with this one," while Karnak, exasperated, responds, "It wasn't even me. No wonder everyone thinks highly of thee now." Barrows agrees, noting that it was a smart move to stop the war, but also a dangerous gamble. "It's a losing fight," he says, "but it was probably the only way to stop the bloodshed." Deventer couldn't refuse the challenge without looking cowardly. Karnak shakes his head in frustration. "No wonder I, or whoever, chose this path. Winning the duel would secure the copper mine and save the family from starvation. But with my current skill level..." Barrows cuts him off, "You're definitely going to die." Karnak nods grimly, "That's why I need to prepare." He turns to Japal and asks, "When is the duel?" Japal calmly replies, "It's in a month, my lord." Karnak feels a sharp pain in his neck and groans, "That's way too damn close." The scene shifts to a table loaded with food. Barrows, staring at the feast in disbelief, asks, "What's all this?" Karnak, with a rare moment of warmth, says, "I prepared it for you. You've always worked hard. You deserve it." Barrows, surprised by the compliment, starts eating and thanks Karnak. But mid-bite he asks, "Shouldn't you be training instead of resting when the duel is so close?" Karnak, with a sly smile, suggests, "Why don't you fight in my stead? It's allowed under the rules." Barrows stops chewing, realizing the feast was a bribe. "You sneaky bastard," he says. "I don't think I can do it. You know I'm not that good with a sword." Karnak pleads, "You've killed 3 of the 4 martial kings. You're the best shot we've got." Barrows waves it off. "I only managed that because of your necromancy. You don't gain martial prowess through just experience. You need real skill. It's like trying to learn advanced swordsmanship without arms. Sure, I might manage if I had half a year to train, but there's no way I can be ready in a month." Annoyed, Karnak pulls the food away. "Stop eating then." Barrows protests, "Don't be petty." Then, after a moment of thought, Barrows suggests, "Why don't you find someone from the Knight Order? They'd stand a better chance." Karnak, frustrated, says, "If there was someone talented enough in the Knight Order, I wouldn't be in this mess." Barrows, thinking for a moment, says, "Well, there's only one choice left and you know it. You have to use necromancy. Now I get why you learned it in the first place." Karnak nods but hesitates. "There's a problem though. Necromancy is banned. Do you remember when we were on the run? We wiped out that household using necromancy, but the Allium Order priest singled me out. They knew I was the one behind it after the knights stopped us." Barrows recalls, "Yeah, I remember. That was intense." Karnak sighs and explains, "I summoned wandering souls to erase the fates of the living, using the light of the abyss. The moment those resentful spirit wraiths appeared, everyone knew we were dealing with black magic. The priests tried using their guardian plaques, symbols of the Allium Order, but their blessings were useless against my spirits. They got cut down like grass." Barrows remembers that grim day, nodding as Karnak continues. "The knights went down too. I had to get us out before the rest of the order caught up, but I couldn't figure out how they knew I was the one using necromancy. The book said no one should have noticed." Barrows then laughs. "That's because the book only mentioned civilians, mages, and knights wouldn't know. People like the priests are an exception." Karnak, surprised by this, shakes his head. "That was a rough time," Barrows says, still smiling, "but it was also the start of your legend." Suddenly, Barrows snaps his fingers as if he's had a realization. "I know what the plan is now." Karnak, catching on, agrees. "Yeah, we have to use necromancy stealthily, making it look like regular combat. But," he trails off, growing more serious, "the problem is the judges of the trial duel are priests. If I use necromancy, it'll be like reliving the past all over again. And I don't want to be on the run again." Barrows, half joking, half serious, says, "Then maybe we should grab some money and run for it." Karnak chuckles but then grows somber. "It would be a shame though. The family members I hated are all dead now. And the people left here, they actually like me." Barrows, still chewing on his thoughts, sarcastically asks Karnak, "So, you're going to keep up this act of a good old patriarch, huh?" "Sure, you do that, and I'll just start preparing for your funeral." Karnak glares at him. "It's not an act. Don't make me sound like the bad guy here." He pauses, thinking as Barrows stands up, ready to leave. "Wait," Karnak calls out, stopping him in his tracks. "Sit back down. It might be dangerous, but I've got an idea." The scene shifts to the northern fort of the Deventer family, where their knights are rigorously training. They're all exhausted, except for one, Randolph, the strongest knight of the Deventer family. He towers above the others, looking barely winded. A fellow knight, Bright, approaches Randolph, asking, "How are the preparations for the trial duel going?" Randolph scoffs. "Why would I need to prepare for someone so unskilled?" Bright nods, but adds cautiously, "True, but you shouldn't let your guard down. He must have some kind of plan, though. You know, just to be safe." Randolph brushes off the concern, waving his hand dismissively. "It's absurd that I'm wasting my time on a spoiled, foolish young master who doesn't even know what the world is like." As Randolph's frustration builds, Bright contemplates silently. He doesn't believe Randolph would lose, but something about the situation feels off. Why would the new lord request such a duel unless he had a plan? Bright feels a sense of unease, but stays quiet. Outside, near the training yard, a merchant's stall is set up, with soldiers distracted by the goods on display. Bright, growing irritated, shouts, "Get back into your positions! Focus!" However, the merchant isn't just any ordinary vendor. He's none other than Barrows, cleverly disguised and observing the knights. As he watches them, a knowing smile creeps across his face. I think I understand the plan now, he mutters under his breath. Barrows, now back at the Jester estate, tells himself it was a good decision to snoop around the Deventer family. Randolph might be powerful in combat, but Barrows has observed enough to know that in a one-on-one duel, Karnak might have a chance. Randolph relies too heavily on typical heavy sword techniques, and the fact that he hasn't even learned battle aura makes his movements predictable. Barrows grins, feeling more confident, but the time constraint still weighs on him. A month isn't much time to whip Karnak into shape. As Barrows finishes his thoughts, a woman calls out, catching him off guard. Do you have any business with my brother Randolph? You keep glaring at him. Barrows quickly switches to his merchant persona, his eyes lighting up with excitement. Oh, you're Randolph's little sister, right? He asks, a little too eager. She nods suspiciously, asking again, what business do you have with him? Barrows laughs nervously, covering his tracks. Ah, I was just captivated by the vigor of the North's strongest knight. Randolph is an idol to us regular folks. He quickly pulls out a bunch of handkerchiefs, trying to sell his act. Look, I even have these fine handkerchiefs. You have a good eye, want one? I'll give you a special price. She reluctantly picks one, examining it. This one looks good. Barrows flashes a charming grin. Great choice. You've got a real eye for quality. Inside, though, he's sweating, hoping she doesn't catch on to his real intentions. After making the sale, he heads back to the Jester estate. Back at the estate's drill hall, Barrows walks in to find Karnak lying on the ground, looking half dead. I'm back, Barrows says casually. How's your stamina training going? Karnak, gasping for breath, barely manages to lift his head. I think I've died, he mutters. Barrows, startled, rushes over and shakes him, yelling, Young master, wake up. Karnak groans, Don't shake me, my meal's going to come back up. Barrows lets out a sigh of relief, then asks, Did you run 50 laps around the drill hall like I told you? I just finished. Karnak replies, sounding defeated. I collapsed right after. I can't run anymore. These insane knights, how do they do this stuff? Barrows crosses his arms, shaking his head. Your stamina is seriously lacking. You won't last a second in a real fight. Karnak looks up at him, clearly annoyed. Is there really a reason for me to train like this? I've never needed to before. Barrows gets serious. You can't do anything with your shrimp-like body right now. Trust me, it's not meaningless. Keep going. Karnak sighs, feeling the weight of Barrows' words. Fine, but I need to rest first. Barrows leans in, his expression turning almost devilish. Oh no, the real training starts now. Karnak's eyes widen in shock. What was all that I just did? Barrows smirks. That was just rehab. Now we begin the real training. Karnak groans, seeing Barrows as a devil incarnate. This was going to be hell. With only 20 days left until the duel, Karnak and Barrows kick off their intense training regimen. Every morning begins with a hearty breakfast, followed by an exhausting routine in the drill hall. 100 push-ups, 100 pole swings, 100 squats, and a brief break before repeating the cycle. As the days pass, the training gets even more intense. Now, with 15 days remaining, Karnak has upgraded to using sandbags as weights during his squats. Barrows notices Karnak's improvement. Looks like you've finally built up some stamina. Karnak, despite feeling exhausted, replies with a bit of pride. Of course. I've trained so much. Although I'm still nowhere near you. Barrows smirks. That's because I've done twice the training you have. But now it's time to start on your swordsmanship. Karnak's eyes light up. Finally, he says, eager to wield a blade. Barrows hands him a sword and takes a moment to analyze Karnak's form. It's a mess, Barrows mutters, instructing him to relax his shoulders and adjust his stance. Karnak follows the instructions, trying to stay focused despite the fatigue. You're looking decent, Barrows says. If you maintain this stance, you won't get beheaded in the first strike. Feeling a bit of confidence, Karnak declares, I'm ready. Barrows doesn't hesitate. He swings at Karnak, who quickly realizes just how slow his reflexes still are. The blow lands squarely in his stomach before he can even attempt to counter. Karnak winces. He's fast. Thinks. What are you doing? Barrows barks. Get back into your stance. Barrows attacks again, and once more, Karnak can't react in time. Blow after blow lands, each one knocking him off balance, but Barrows keeps yelling at him to stay in form. Karnak somehow manages to maintain his stance until finally, a harder hit sends him sprawling to the ground. Barrows stands over him, twirling the pole he'd been using instead of a sword. This is why knights can overwhelm civilians. They don't give their opponents a chance to counter. You need to hold your stance and dodge the follow-up attacks. Karnak, panting and struggling to rise, mutters, "Even if I hold my stance, I can't dodge your next attack." Barrows, after Karnak's latest training session, explains, "Of course, the goal of this training isn't just survival, it's to show your fighting spirit to Randolph." Karnak, still catching his breath, asks, "Do I really need to do that in a duel?" Barrows nods. Randolph has a habit of showing off. He likes to toy with his opponents, especially in front of spectators. But if he senses his opponent has lost the will to fight, he'll end things quickly to avoid damaging his honor. That's why you need to show him that you won't give up. If you do, you'll have a better chance of surviving the fight. Karnak looks nervous but understands. The key is to appear strong, even if he's struggling. 5 days until the duel, Karnak is charging forward with a shield in hand, swinging at Barrows. Barrows blocks effortlessly, taunting him, "You can do better than this." He counters, swinging at Karnak, who backpedals awkwardly. "Scream louder. Make sure everyone knows you're still in the fight." Barrows shouts as he lands another blow. Karnak raises his shield, but the force of the strike sends him flying across the arena, crashing into the wall. Barrows scolds him, "Don't even think about taking a hit. You'll be killed. Always roll out of danger." Karnak, gasping for air, mutters, "I'm going to look so stupid." The next day, Karnak does exactly what Barrows instructed, rolling on the ground after every attack. By the third day, he's rolling even faster, and with 2 days left until the duel, he finally manages to roll away from Barrows' attack and get back into his stance swiftly. Exhausted, Karnak complains, "I might end up dying before the duel even starts at this rate." Barrows, surprisingly, gives a nod of approval. "With this, I think you're just about ready. It's time to move on to the final part." Karnak perks up, curious. Barrows, with a serious look, hands him a sword. "I'm going to teach you the 4 martial king sword techniques." Karnak is surprised he knows about this technique, and Barrows explains that he knows almost all techniques since the 4 martial kings were once his subordinates. He learned every technique from them except for Rapunzel's. Karnak asks why he didn't learn hers, and Barrows explains that he never turned her into a death knight because she resisted until the end. So, he punished her by cutting her into 2/3 and making her a palace gatekeeper. Karnak thinks this seems very cruel and questions if he is that cruel himself. Barrows then says that today, Karnak will learn the martial king Levin's Delphiad sword technique. Karnak is concerned about whether it's possible to master it in just 2 days, given it's a martial king skill. Barrows reassures him that they only need to start with the basics. It's now the day of the duel, and the arena is set up on the border of the territories. Some citizens from Deventer are chatting about the match. One says it will be exciting and expects Sir Randolph to win, while another hopes the fight won't be boring. Meanwhile, Karnak's supporters are cheering him on, noting his intense training. One of them mentions they have to believe in him because of his hard work. Karnak steps up and announces it's time to begin. The crowd's excitement grows louder, and Barrows cheerfully responds, "Yes, young master." The priest slams a pole into the ground and commands silence, declaring, "Be silent in the presence of allium." He explains that both houses have claimed ownership of the copper mines, and the dispute will be settled through combat. He calls Karnak of House Jestard and Sir Randolph of Deventer to step forward and face the goddess. Before the battle begins, the priest states that each fighter has been given a handicap and equipment based on their abilities. He asks if they both intend to fight honorably, and they swear to do so. The priest then proclaims, "With the warrior's pledge, may the scales of justice find the truth." The trial is ready to begin. Karnak and Randolph stare each other down, then step apart to prepare for the fight. Randolph breaks the silence, saying, "This won't change anything," as he charges toward Karnak. Karnak blocks the attack and replies, "We'll only know when we see this through." He strikes at Randolph, forcing him to step back. Randolph, impressed, admits that Karnak isn't just talk. Randolph attacks again, but Karnak blocks with his shield. The crowd is surprised, noticing Karnak's improved skills. Some comment that they knew something was different about him. Barrows, watching from the sidelines, calmly observes that the fight is progressing as expected. He notices that Randolph is still testing Karnak's abilities. Karnak, encouraged by his progress, sticks to his training. He roars a battle cry, challenging Randolph to come at him. Randolph grins, impressed by Karnak's spirit, even though he believes Karnak's skills are lacking. Deciding to escalate the fight, Randolph begins to use a strange energy, separate from his aura. Karnak realizes that Randolph's sword power has increased, and he can no longer rely on his shield to block. As Randolph's attack closes in, Karnak rolls away at full speed, narrowly dodging the blow. He lets out another war cry, regaining his stance and preparing for the next move. Randolph watches Karnak roll away and thinks, "What kind of crude move was that?" The crowd starts laughing, calling Karnak dexterous for dodging the attack in such an unexpected way. Some priests watching comment that while it worked, it's not what they expected from a duel like this. Karnak tosses his shield aside, declaring, "I don't need this anymore," and taunts Randolph by calling him as slow as a turtle. He mocks Randolph, saying, "A muscular pig like you dares to call yourself a knight?" Randolph, now angry, calls Karnak a cheeky bastard and asks if he's being mocked. He promises that he'll make sure Karnak never opens his mouth again. Karnak smirks and tells Randolph to try his worst, taking a stance. Randolph is shocked when he recognizes the stance as the Delphiad sword technique, a skill of the legendary martial King Levin. The crowd notices too, with some citizens saying it looks like their lord has been learning the techniques of the martial kings. Hope rises among Karnak's supporters, believing he might actually win. Randolph, however, isn't fooled. He laughs, admitting he almost fell for Karnak's taunt. He reminds himself to stay calm, noting that only geniuses with real battle experience can use the martial king's techniques. He doubts Karnak truly has the skill, thinking that even if Karnak somehow learned it, it won't guarantee victory. Randolph commends Karnak's effort but remains confident, pointing his sword at him and swearing to enact justice in the name of Allium. Karnak realizes that his bluff hasn't worked, and this won't be enough to defeat Randolph. He recalls asking Barrows during training if one day was enough to learn the technique. Barrows had told him that he just needed to roughly copy it for the appearance of skill. Barrows assured him he wouldn't need to pick up a sword again once this is over, hinting that the real plan lies elsewhere. As the fight continues, Karnak blocks Randolph's attacks, but each strike feels incredibly heavy. He thinks to himself, "Barrows never warned me about this." Karnak, battered but determined, manages to trade blows with Randolph, declaring that he still has a duty to fulfill. With manly tears streaming down his face, he asks if Randolph really thinks this will defeat the bloodline of House Jestard. Randolph, confused, wonders what Karnak is babbling about, seeing as he's clearly getting beaten up. Karnak continues, proclaiming that the sword of Jestard will never fall, which causes the citizens to see him in a new light. They question why they ever doubted him and begin crying tears of respect. Karnak taunts Randolph, asking if he's scared, while Barrows watches with a smile. He notes that Karnak isn't taking any direct hits and remarks that all the time spent training is finally paying off. Barrows knows that Karnak has a talent for talking smack, which is what he's been doing the entire fight. Randolph, visibly irritated, says he's too frustrated to drag the fight out any longer. He points out that Karnak looks like he's on his last breath and questions why he's still talking. Randolph then charges at him, faster than before, declaring that he'll end the fight here and now. Barrows, sensing the moment has come, tells Karnak to brace himself. Karnak realizes this is the chance Barrows prepared him for. He remembers the training, where Barrows explained that mimicking the moves isn't enough. Without a proper strike, people will see through his attacks. Barrows had predicted that Randolph would aim for Karnak's legs to limit his movement. At that critical moment, Karnak is supposed to shift his stance defensively and stab his sword into the ground. As Randolph rushes in, Karnak follows Barrows's instructions, shifting his stance and planting his sword into the ground. Randolph is caught off guard that Karnak actually blocked his strike. Without hesitation, Karnak swings his sword in an upward diagonal, colliding with Randolph's blade. Karnak quickly changes his grip and strikes again, landing a blow directly to Randolph's chest. Barrows explains that this move is called the double uppercut overkill. As Randolph's blood flies across the arena, Karnak stands exhausted, having poured everything into the final attack. He's completely gassed out, but he's still standing. Randolph laughs, brushing off the blow as if it were nothing. "Is that all you've got?" he sneers, wiping a bit of blood from the small cut on his chest. "A kitten could scratch me better than that." His confidence is unwavering, and he seems unbothered by the attack. Karnak wonders if this is the end, and the crowd starts to believe the match is over, thinking that miracles don't exist and that reality is as cruel as ever. Randolph, noticing Karnak's struggle, sneers, "You let your guard down. I'm sure your fellow knights will mock you for this." Despite the dire situation, Karnak, barely holding on, smiles. "I'm risking my life right now, and you're still worried about me," he says. His grin widens. "This isn't so bad. At least I won't feel sorry for you afterward." Randolph, confused by Karnak's strange expression, suddenly feels a burning sensation. A purple flame bursts from the wound on his chest, stretching toward the sky. Randolph is shocked, unable to comprehend what's happening to him. The priest overseeing the duel instantly recognizes the dark aura. His guards grip their swords tightly, preparing to act. As Randolph tries to slice through the purple flames, Karnak charges at him, shouting, "No matter what tricks you're using, I won't lose." But before Karnak can get close, Randolph, his leg now encased in the necromantic aura, unleashes a devastating kick. And Karnak is sent flying through the air, crashing into the crowd. The audience gasps in disbelief, questioning how a human could possess such strength. They wonder if Randolph is controlling the black aura. Barrows, watching from the sidelines, calmly remarks, "That's necromancy. This power, it must be from the devil." Alarmed, the priest orders his knights to subdue Randolph immediately. "In the name of Allium, we will bring justice and judgment upon this unclean being." The knights leap toward Randolph, commanding him to surrender and put down his sword. But Randolph, still reeling and confused, shouts, "What are you talking about?" The black, devilish aura lashes out violently, knocking the guards aside. The priest barely manages to escape the arena, shouting to his fellow clergymen, "This is necromancy. We need to stop him before it's too late." Randolph, bewildered and frightened, struggles to understand what's happening. "What did Karnak do to me?" His eyes search the crowd, and he spots Karnak, grinning from the sidelines. "You must be confused," Karnak says with a smirk. "You shouldn't be causing a scene like this." Suddenly, the dark aura begins to constrict around Randolph, trapping him in place. One of the knights looks to the priest and says, "It looks like he's being controlled by the curse." The priest, however, shakes his head. "No, he's simply unskilled at controlling this dark power. We'll have to strike him down the moment we get a chance." The knights charge at Randolph, screaming, thinking this is their chance. Randolph cries out, "No!" just as they impale him with their weapons. Blood spills from his mouth as the black and purple aura slowly fades away. His body collapses to the arena floor, lifeless. One of the knights turns to the priest and says, "He's no longer breathing. What should we do?" The priest replies, "We must send officials to Deventer's estate and begin a thorough investigation." The high priest, raising his voice for the crowd, declares, "A verdict has been reached. The fighter of Deventer called upon dark powers during this holy trial, disgracing the name of our goddess. The victor is Karnak, Baron of Jestard." The scene shifts to Deventer's estate. Knights uncover blankets and cloaks with necromantic symbols all over the property. Randolph's sister, distraught, pleads, "There's no way this is true. I don't believe it. These were bought recently from a traveling peddler." One of the priests holds up a suspicious bottle from Randolph's room. "What is this medicine?" he asks. It's just a hair growth formula, she explains, her voice trembling. Randolph is always worried about going bald. The priest sternly informs her, "You'll be summoned for a hearing in a few days." Shocked, she stares at him, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. A few days later, at the estate of Jestard, Karnak and Barrows celebrate their victory. Karnak grins, asking Barrows, "How does it feel to eat a feast fit for champions?" Barrows, mouth full of food, replies, "It's amazing compared to what we had during training." "Of course," Karnak laughs. "It's a feast for our victory. I'm sure they're celebrating in the town square too." Barrows, curious, asks, "How did you come up with that spell?" Karnak smirks. "I had to do whatever it took to win." Randolph's fiery temper made it work even better than I expected. A flashback reveals Karnak and Barrows discussing their plan a month earlier. Barrows asks, "How do you plan to use necromancy?" Karnak, deep in thought, replies, "Listen, it's simple. Whether I get caught using necromancy or die in the trial, the result is the same. But instead of me using it, Randolph will." Barrows stares at him, realization dawning. "You're going to trick Randolph into using the dark magic himself?" Karnak nods, a sly grin spreading across his face. "That's right. He'll be the one to fall by the curse, not me." Barrows, curious, asks what Karnak has in mind. Karnak grins and replies, "I'll need to put on an act. Pretending to be an idiot is my specialty, after all. With how far the officials are, I should be able to fool them. In the heat of battle, no one will know who's casting the spell. It's a high-level necromancy spell, too strong for anyone to suspect I'm the one behind it." Barrows nods. "I guess there's nothing to worry about then." Karnak's expression turns serious. "There's just one issue. For the spell to work, I need Randolph to spill some blood. But with my current skills, I'm not sure if I can land a hit." Barrows smiles confidently. "If all you need is to make him bleed, leave that to me." Karnak sighs. "I had a horrible time pulling this off." Barrows chuckles. "Aren't you glad you put in all that effort?" Karnak leans back, musing, "It's strange, though. Randolph could have won easily without necromancy, but somehow we avoided any suspicion. Even the investigation into the Deventer family worked in our favor." Barrows asks, "Why? How did that happen?" The scene shifts to the Grand Temple of Allium, specifically the Gesselan branch. The high priest, with a grave expression, asks, "Are you done investigating the Deventer family's dark powers? This is a serious matter. Only report confirmed facts." The priest replies, "After our investigation, we're certain the dark power didn't come from an ordinary necromancer. Using the fragment of the transcendent, the goddess warned us. The attributes match perfectly. This is the darkness of the apocalypse." Back at Karnak's estate, he bursts out laughing. "Looks like luck is on my side this time." He and Barrows jump around, celebrating. "The world is in our favor." Karnak cheers. Barrows grins but raises a concern. Now that the Deventer family is gone, there will be many powers vying for control of the mines. Karnak smirks. "That's exactly why I needed to strengthen my necromancy in the first place." Barrows, confused, asks, "But what's your plan if the Order finds out?" Karnak's eyes narrow. "That's why I needed a way to use necromancy without getting caught." 3 months later, inside the Jestard estate, Karnak sits in the center of a glowing magic circle, beads of sweat on his forehead. "Focus," he mutters to himself, his eyes narrowed in concentration. His hand trembles as an aura begins to gather, swirling around him in dark, shadowy tendrils. He looks up at the night sky, where the moon hangs high, casting a dim, eerie glow. "I'm absorbing the negative energy from the moonlight, the darkness of the deep night," he murmurs. "But it's not enough to just pull in the corrupt energy. I have to filter it." His face tightens with effort as the swirling dark aura begins to compress in his hand. Only the purest energy left behind can be used, Karnak explains to himself, guiding the negative force through his body, purging its chaos. The black aura starts to shift and glow, its ominous hue transforming into a fierce, reddish flame. A triumphant smile spreads across his face. "It worked," he breathes, the flame dancing in his palm. "Chaos magic perfected." The scene shifts to the training grounds, where Barros is in the middle of a sparring match. He's been training for 3 months to become an official knight of the Gestured House. However, there's a problem. The soldiers he trains with aren't exactly skilled. Across from him stands Gil Limon, a senior soldier, who is breathing heavily, barely able to keep up. Meanwhile, Barros looks as fresh as ever. Let's call it a day. Gil Limon pants, clearly exhausted. Barros nods and thanks him, appreciating the practice. Gil Limon chuckles and says, "You've improved so fast, it's embarrassing. At this rate, you'll be the strongest knight of Gestured in no time." Barros shakes his head modestly. "I still have a long way to go," he replies. "Modesty will get you far, but trust me, you're going to be great," Gil Limon says with a grin. A group of soldiers nearby call out to Barros, inviting him to join them for drinks. Barros declines with a smile, explaining, "I've been given an important task by the young master." Gil Limon shrugs. "What a shame. See you tomorrow then." Barros waves goodbye, making his way toward Karnak's chambers. He barges in without knocking, cheerfully announcing, "It's snack time." Suddenly, a blast of red energy flies toward him, barely missing by inches. Barros stumbles back, eyes wide. "Whoa! What the?" he exclaims. Karnak glares at him, visibly annoyed. "Barros, I told you to knock first." Barros, still catching his breath from the near-death experience, looks puzzled. "What was that technique you just used? That didn't look like necromancy." Karnak smirks, holding up a hand where red energy swirls around his fingers. "You're sharp. It's becoming harder to consider it necromancy now. It's more like mana," he explains, showcasing the new red aura. Barros furrows his brow. "But you can't use mana unless you switch powers, right?" Karnak begins to explain. "In this world there are 4 ways to transcend human limitations: a knight's battle aura, a mage's mana, a cleric's divinity, and necromancy, which deals with the forces of darkness and death. A transcendent force gathers only the energy suited to that force within your body. Once you've accumulated enough energy, it transforms into power, tailored specifically to your soul and body." Barros nods, but then asks, "So once you choose a power, you're stuck with it? You can't switch?" Karnak looks at Barros and explains further. "I didn't change my power. It's just the second stage of necromancy." Barros raises an eyebrow. "At its second stage, your power changes?" Karnak smirks, delving into his explanation. "Necromancy uses death energy and corrupt energy, essentially very dirty mana. It works well for me because I've had a rotten upbringing," he says with a laugh. "But just like some foods are made using fermented, nasty methods and still turn out refined, I've found a way to process that energy. By filtering away the negative emotions, hate, grudges, I'm left with pure energy of darkness and death. I've turned that into something new, something more refined. I call it chaos magic." Barros listens, only half amused. "Don't care, didn't ask," he jokes, though he admits, "but it does feel a lot like mana." Karnak nods. "It's close enough. I can pass as a mage now. With chaos mana, I've transformed necromancy into something that looks and feels like normal magic." Barros narrows his eyes in curiosity. "But will you be able to mimic the strength you had when you were the king of death, just using this chaos mana?" Karnak's grin fades slightly. "With great power comes great consequences. Right now, I only need enough power to protect my territory. Becoming too powerful always leads to trouble." The scene shifts to the dense, shadowy western forest of Gestured territory. A group of soldiers, led by Gil Limon, surveys the area. Scattered around them are the bodies of wolves, all seemingly dragged from the nearby mines. The wolves, called snarls, look unnaturally strong, their fur bristling with dark energy. "All right, everyone, get ready to move back," Gil Limon says, instructing the group. "I'll make the report myself." As the soldiers begin to pack up, a snarl lunges out of the shadows, teeth bared, heading straight for Gil Limon. He's too slow to react, and the beast closes in. At the last second, Barros leaps in, knocking the wolf aside with a powerful strike, saving Gil Limon. "You're a bit late," Barrows says with a grin, offering Gil-Limon a hand. You all right? Gil-Limon, still catching his breath, nods. Thanks. It's reassuring having an official knight with us. He chuckles. Though you've only been one for a short while. Barrows laughs awkwardly. Yeah, it still feels weird. Feels like I'm just playing dress up. Gil-Limon glances around the forest. But you've noticed how strange these snarls are, right? They've gotten at least twice as strong. Gil-Limon, his voice tense, tells Barrows, the rumor is definitely true. It's called the Goddess Oracle, the Oracle of Destruction. The 7 goddesses who protect the world and humanity sent it down to the Order. It speaks of a coming darkness, an emptiness that will open its mouth and spew forth a forbidden fate. A darkness that erases light, reaps life. In time, hardships will arise, and beasts will obtain the wrong power. The dead will awaken and walk lands where they don't belong. Barrows listens closely, his expression darkening as Gil-Limon continues. The oracle says the king of death will descend and paint the world with blood and tears. He will be the end, the herald of destruction. Gil-Limon's eyes narrow. After the oracle, monsters from a nearby continent went rampant, and necromancers became uncontrollable, causing chaos across the world. The religious orders announced the oracle to prevent panic and began fighting under the blessings of the goddesses to protect humanity. Barrows, later in Karnak's office, relays the troubling information. There was no such oracle before we regressed. Why does the past keep changing? Karnak leans back in his chair, annoyed. We don't have enough information, Barrows. It's frustrating. Barrows grows more concerned. The rumors are practically pointing fingers at us. Is this oracle related to you, young master? Karnak shakes his head. The timeline doesn't add up. The oracle was issued long before we even regressed. Barrows, pacing the room, mulls over everything. This must be why the Randolph incident went so smoothly. The world is collapsing. Don't we need to do something? Are we the cause of this? Karnak lets out a sigh. What can we do? We're just a couple of nobodies from the countryside. And who's this supposed king of death anyway? You really think destroying the world is that simple? We've tried it before, and look how that turned out. Barrows, hesitant, offers, aren't there heroes out there? Surely humanity will figure it out without us getting involved. Karnak, after a pause, nods slowly. Maybe you're right. Let's leave the world saving to the heroes. We'll stay in our territory, enjoy our lives, and let them handle the chaos. A week later, the two are in Karnak's office when a man, dressed in the robes of the Latiel order, suddenly appears. He introduces himself formally, explaining that he seeks Karnak's support for their holy cause. Barrows, standing quietly behind Karnak, watches the stranger with growing dread. Oh, we're screwed, he thinks, realizing that they're about to be dragged into something much bigger than they anticipated. The man from the Latiel order informs Karnak further. We discovered that a necromancer, previously active in Deerarth City, fled here to Jestard. We believe he's hiding in the nearby forest, and I'd like to ask for a guide who knows the area well. Barrows glances over at Karnak, silently praying his master can read his mind and will find a way to avoid this involvement. But Karnak, much to Barrows' shock, puts down his tea calmly and responds, "There's no way I can reject matters concerning a goddess." Barrows is taken aback, his mouth falling open in disbelief. The Latiel representative smiles, thanks Karnak for his cooperation, and departs. The moment he leaves, Barrows, visibly annoyed, rounds on Karnak. I thought we agreed not to get involved in worldly matters. Karnak shrugs, I'm concerned. Think about it. It's a perfect opportunity to assess the situation with just one person. Don't you agree? Barrows raises an eyebrow. And what's the plan now? Karnak grins. We'll catch this necromancer ourselves. I'll show him what real power looks like. Later that night, the necromancer, breathless and dirty, stumbles through the forest, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. Did I lose them? He mutters, his voice shaking. I thought I could finally stop living like a beggar, but they started chasing me again. When I survive this, I'll make sure to get my revenge. Before he can finish, a dozen tiny orbs of light, like miniature suns, suddenly burst into life around him, illuminating the dark forest. The guards' voices echo from the trees. This is the end for you, demonic necromancer. Surrender now. The necromancer curses under his breath, realizing he's walked right into a trap. Damn it, he hisses, his eyes flashing with malice. You think I'll just give up? He begins channeling his dark magic, summoning a wraith from the underworld. The guards, panicking, reach for their protective charms, but they're too late. The wraiths descend on them, and within seconds, they are torn apart by the malevolent spirits. Karnak, watching the chaos unfold from a tree nearby, sighs, shaking his head. This is driving me insane. His technique is all wrong. His spells are sloppy. This is just embarrassing. Barrows, leaning against the trunk, yawns. He clearly didn't learn the basics. Are we going to do something or just watch? Karnak smirks. It's about time. Let's finish this. Barrows, eyes narrowing, points ahead. Look at him. He's trying to make a run for it again. Let's cut him off before the guards catch up. The necromancer manages to escape into a cave, panting heavily. I used up more power than I expected, he mutters, leaning against the wall, trying to catch his breath. I need to hide for now, but what's that warmth I feel? He pauses, looking around the cave, then stops cold when his eyes fall on Karnak and Barrows sitting near the cave's entrance. Barrows smirks, waving casually. We were starting to worry you weren't going to make it. Karnak adds, you've got a keen eye. This is actually our usual hideout. Both of them laugh, standing up as the necromancer's eyes widen in fear. Who are you? The necromancer stammers, realizing the situation is rapidly turning against him. Karnak replies calmly, oh, just some people out to get you. Panic sets in. These bastards dare mess with me? Thinks. Without hesitation, he summons his wraiths, spectral figures emerging from the darkness, surrounding Karnak and Barrows. The necromancer grins, using the distraction to make a run for it. You brought this upon yourselves, he shouts as he bolts from the cave. Barrows watches the wraiths circle them. There's quite a number of them. I can't exactly cut through these things with a sword. What's the plan? Karnak smirks. Stay put. I've been wanting to test my chaos mana. Outside, the necromancer continues sprinting through the woods, glancing over his shoulder. They'll be caught up for a while? No way they're getting past those wraiths. But just as he starts to feel a shred of relief, a loud explosion shakes the forest. The ground trembles, and a massive burst of reddish energy erupts from the cave, sending the wraiths flying in every direction. The necromancer stares in disbelief. What cow? Karnak steps out of the cave, dusting his hands off. Where do you think you're going? But Karnak merely raises an eyebrow. With a flick of his fingers, dozens of tiny fireballs, infused with his chaos mana, appear around him. Concentrate and explode, he whispers, sending a fireball at each wraith. One by one, they are incinerated instantly, leaving only ashes behind. The necromancer is stunned. A mage? No. Stronger than I thought. I'm going to be caught at this rate. He grits his teeth, summoning all his remaining power. I'll show them the true power of death, he cries, calling forth an even stronger wraith, a towering figure of shadow. Barrows leans lazily against a tree. Ah, young necromancers. So full of energy. Karnak shakes his head, annoyed. Why is he calling it an evil spirit, when it's just another wraith? Useless. The necromancer laughs maniacally. I can see the fear in your faces, he taunts, believing victory is within his grasp. Karnak's expression darkens. Fear? Are you blind? He strides forward, growing increasingly irritated. It's too late for you to beg for your life, the necromancer sneers, launching the massive wraith toward Karnak. But Karnak doesn't dodge. He glares at the wraith, his eyes glowing with dark energy. Kneel, he commands in a voice laced with necromantic power. The wraith, trembling in fear, immediately halts mid-air and falls to the ground, bowing before Karnak, quivering under the force of his aura. The necromancer, now terrified, stumbles back. No, that's impossible. The necromancer, wide-eyed with shock, finally realizes that Karnak too wields necromantic powers. The necromancer? He stammers. Karnak smirks, his expression cold. Only figuring that out now? Clueless, he says, letting out a pulse of green energy. But I bet you don't recognize this either. Suddenly, a massive green hand materializes in front of the necromancer. Karnak grins, saying, "This is my specialty, misdirection." The giant hand clenches into a fist, wrapping around the man as he screams in agony, helpless against Karnak's power. The necromancer collapses to the ground, writhing in pain, trapped by the magic. Karnak steps forward, his voice calm but menacing. "Hey, get up." The necromancer's body jerks upright, his eyes glazed over. "Yes, master," he responds, his voice flat and mechanical. Karnak stares at him, unimpressed. "Tell me, how did you gain your powers?" The man, now completely under Karnak's control, speaks without hesitation. "It was a stroke of luck. I was just a beggar, drowning my sorrows in the streets when I felt it. Darkness from an alley swallowed me whole. I could feel an unknown power surging through me, something immense, the authority of the apocalypse, just like in the prophecy. With that kind of strength in my hands, I didn't hesitate. I used it to kill everyone I hated, even sneaking into a mansion to take what I wanted." Karnak rolls his eyes, cutting him off. "That's enough. You're just some random nobody," he says dismissively. Barrows looks uneasy. "Are you seriously going to mind control him?" Karnak shrugs. "Sure, but I need him to clean things up first." Under Karnak's control, the necromancer unsheathes his own dagger and, with no hesitation, plunges it into his own chest. His body crumples to the ground, lifeless. Karnak stands over the corpse, staring down at it with a calculating gaze. Now, it's time. Barrows watches as Karnak begins to absorb the dead necromancer's power. "I thought you were trying to avoid filthy energy like that," Barrows remarks, his brow furrowed. Karnak, still focused on the task, replies, "I need to examine this power more closely. The search party will be here soon, so I'll just take a bit to avoid raising suspicion." As Karnak continues to absorb the energy, his face twists with confusion. Something is clearly wrong. His movements slow, and he suddenly halts the process, shaking his head. "Something's off," Karnak mutters, visibly disturbed. Barrows steps forward, concerned. "Are you okay?" Karnak, still processing what he just absorbed, responds hesitantly. "No, something's really off about this." A few days later, back at the estate, Karnak sets up a powerful soundproof barrier in his study. Barrows enters, glancing around. "You put up a barrier? It's that serious?" Karnak nods, his face grim. "It's not ordinary at all. I took a closer look at the power I collected from that necromancer." Barrows raises an eyebrow. "And? What did you find?" Karnak hesitates for a moment, then sighs. "It's me." Barrows blinks in confusion. "What do you mean? How does that make sense?" Karnak shakes his head. "I don't know how, but this power, it's my power. Somehow I'm the source." Karnak sighs, seemingly tired of explaining it but knowing Barrows needs the clarification. "Think back to why we chose regression over possession. The bodies we possessed couldn't handle our spiritual power. We had too much power and tried squeezing ourselves into shells that weren't equipped to contain us. It didn't work. So, we abandoned that route, separated our souls, and regressed into our original bodies to increase the success rate." Barrows nods, following along. "Right, but..." Karnak cuts him off, continuing, "When we left our living bodies and traveled back in time, most of our power stayed behind. But here's the twist. I think my necromancy was bound more to my spirit than my body. So, when my soul crossed into the past, a portion of that power came with it. My body couldn't contain it, though, so it expelled most of that energy." Barrows furrows his brow. "Wait, so that expelled energy, you're saying it became the darkness of the end?" Karnak nods, confirming Barrows's worst fears. "Yes. It must have scattered and warped into what's now this darkness. It's my power, set loose." Barrows lets out a deep sigh, rubbing his temples. "So, if that power is still out there and it's enough to end the world, what do we do?" Are we supposed to just call it back? Karnak snorts, unimpressed by the suggestion. If I dropped a coin on the street, would it just roll back to me? It's not that simple. Barrows throws up his hands, frustrated. So we're just screwed because of you? This whole apocalypse thing, it's your fault. Karnak exhales sharply, his tone growing more serious. Look, I've already tried ruining the world once. The result was clear. It's not as easy as it sounds. But now we have to step in. Barrows stares at him in disbelief. I thought we'd have an easy life ahead of us. And now you're saying we have to fix this mess. Karnak grimaces, clearly not thrilled about it either. Yeah, I need to look into the other pieces of this darkness. And I'm dragging you along with me. Barrows groans, slumping in his saddle. Great. Back to living out of sacks, then? Karnak gives him a half smirk. I'll make sure you're well fed. Don't worry. I don't want to do this either. As they ride through the open countryside, Barrows seems to lighten up, the tension fading slightly as he enjoys the fresh air. You know, getting out here doesn't feel so bad. Maybe it's just because we're not being chased for once. And no bandits on the road either. That's a plus. Karnak glances at him, his expression calm. We look like we have some backing. Bandits know better than to bother us. Barrows chuckles, shaking his head. Money sure is great. We might have left under the pretense of training, but all we're really doing is heading to Deerarth City. Exactly, Karnak says. That's where the last necromancer we caught got his powers. There have to be clues there. Barrows frowns. Still feels like we're flying by the seat of our pants. The darkness of the end isn't just going to walk up to us, is it? You don't have some magical ability to track it, do you? Karnak shakes his head, a smirk playing at his lips. Nope. We're doing this the old-fashioned way. You remember how we handled things back in the day, right? Barrows sighs as they approach the city gates. Outside one of the adventurer guilds in Deerarth, Karnak said, this is the best place to gather information. They have all kinds of details after all. Barrows nodded, adding, I remember when we used to hide our identities as adventurers. I didn't think we'd be doing it again. Karnak reassured him, it's no different this time. We won't need to become real adventurers. They headed inside and approached the reception desk. Karnak handed some money to the receptionist, who welcomed them warmly. What kind of information are you looking for? The receptionist asked. We need information about the darkness of the end, Karnak said. Barrows also asked, why does the Lord ignore the fact that monsters are roaming his territory? Karnak added, we want to know every detail. The receptionist nodded. There have been quite a few requests about the darkness of the end. We've gathered a lot of information. He went to a cabinet, searching for the files. After a moment, he returned with a large stack of papers and placed them in front of Karnak and Barrows. You can start with these. Karnak and Barrows began sifting through the pile. Barrows quickly grew frustrated, saying, there's so much false information here. People are blaming the darkness of the end for everything. The receptionist shrugged. It looks like there's not much useful information here. Maybe you should try filtering it out. But Karnak shook his head. No, I'll take everything. Barrows asked, is that really necessary? Karnak put a hand on Barrows' shoulder and said, I'll use magical messaging to sort through it all. Sometimes, important information is hidden among useless details. Barrows sighed, clearly annoyed. This is going to take longer than I thought. Suddenly, a man began shouting, why won't anyone believe me? Karnak and Barrows turned to see the man rushing toward the desk. There's an evil necromancer in town, he exclaimed, desperate to file a report. No one believes me. The receptionist asked, a necromancer? Have you reported this to the temple? The man shook his head, frustrated. They won't believe me either. Please, explain what happened, the receptionist said. The man started explaining. A while ago, a foreigner named Cleo showed up in our town. He moved into an old, abandoned mansion and acted like he owned the place. He's always smiling and charming everyone. No one knows where he got all his money, but he throws festivals and makes everyone love him. He's even seduced all the young women, including my fiancée, Emily. The man began to cry. She's my angel, and now she's fallen for him. Karnak and Barrows exchanged bored glances. Some nearby men overheard and asked, "So, because some handsome, rich guy is popular, you think he's using dark magic? Sounds like a typical playboy to us." The embarrassed man stammered, No, it's more than that. I know it's necromancy." But the men just shook their heads, saying, "You're overthinking it." The receptionist apologized, "I'm sorry, but I can't accept this report. If you're really worried, maybe you could hire an adventurer, though that will cost you." Shocked by the high price, the man ran off, shouting, "You'll all regret not listening to me." After he left, some men nearby chuckled, "That guy should have kept his jealousy in check." Another added, "I guess he thought everyone would jump into action if he mentioned necromancy." "Yeah," said another, "there are too many people like him these days." Karnak sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Well, we didn't get anything useful today." Barrows, trying to lighten the mood, said, "There's a good restaurant nearby. Let's grab something to eat." As they prepared to leave, the receptionist called after them, "I'll let you know if we get any new information." As soon as they left the guild, Barrows said to Karnak, "Doesn't Cleo sound suspicious? Why would a guy that rich and handsome stay in some small town instead of a big city? There's only one reason he'd go after innocent country girls. He must be after their souls for some kind of dark magic. We should hurry." They reached the town on the outskirts of the city, and Barrows pointed ahead. "This must be the town that guy was talking about." Karnak nodded. "Let me check." He used his mana to scan the area and discovered a barrier. This barrier is incredibly well made. Even a high-ranked priest would struggle to detect it. Cleo must be highly skilled. I need to check if this is connected to the darkness of the end, or he could just be a normal necromancer. Suddenly, a man called out to them. They saw him running over, dressed in priest robes. Both Karnak and Barrows were surprised, wondering what a priest was doing here. The man introduced himself. "I'm Alias, the top inquisitor of the Earth Order, serving Hatoba. It's nice to meet you." Barrows formally introduced Karnak. "This is Baron Karnak of House Jestard, and I am his knight." Alias was shocked. "You're not adventurers? Why are you here?" Karnak replied casually, "I heard some strange rumors while passing by and decided to take a look." Alias laughed, then asked, "Could you do me a favor? It's all for the goddess, and I promise it won't be anything strange." Karnak, feeling overwhelmed by Alias's bright energy, turned away, squinting. Barrows asked, "What kind of favor?" Alias explained, "I'm not entirely sure yet, but there's a chance a necromancer is hiding in this town." Karnak and Barrows were both surprised. "The Order knows too?" Karnak, "Isn't that bad?" Barrows, curious, asked, "Then why did you come here alone?" Alias shrugged. "The Order won't act without solid proof. They don't believe there's really a necromancer here because there's been so much false information going around." Karnak commented, "This situation seems suspicious." Alias shrugged. "It's all relative. It's not hard to be considered rich and handsome in a small town like this, compared to the city. That's why I was trying to handle it myself." Alias then looked at Barrows, admiring his worn sword and armor. "Your equipment is well used, and you look well trained. You must be strong." He smiled, impressed by their appearance. "I'm sure you both will be a great help." Though Alias was bright and cheerful, Karnak and Barrows weren't thrilled about getting involved. Karnak sighed. "He's a bit annoying, but I guess we can stick with him for a while. We need to check some things anyway." As they walked, Barrows used magical messaging to ask Karnak, "What will you do if he finds out you're a necromancer?" "I'll just erase his memories," Karnak replied. Barrows sighed. "You're evil. Let's avoid that. People don't stay sane after something like that." Karnak then told Alias, "All right, we'll help you." Alias beamed with excitement. "Great. Let's go to the church first." They headed through the town and finally arrived at the Church of Wind. Inside, they were greeted by the head priest, Graz, and a nun named Julia. "Welcome to the Church of Wind, brother," Graz said. "Mr. Cleo has been a great help to the town. He's definitely not involved in necromancy. Another priest came by earlier, but he left after a short time. It's a shame you came all this way for nothing." Alias responded, "It's fine. If there's nothing here, it means no one's in danger, which is a relief." Graz agreed and offered to make them comfortable, guiding them to their rooms. Meanwhile, at Cleo's estate, a barrier surrounded his mansion. His butler reported, "Someone from the order has come to investigate." Cleo, gripping his wine glass angrily, muttered, "The rats just keep coming." Back at the church, after settling in, Karnak said, "Even the townspeople seem to have a positive opinion of Cleo. Maybe the whole town's been deceived." Alias nodded. "Yes, it would be pointless to question them. I want to meet him." Karnak was surprised. "You want to go to his mansion? Are you going to interrogate him?" Alias laughed. "There's a more effective method than that. Just follow my plan, both of you." Back at Cleo's mansion, we see him walking down a hallway late at night. One of his servants notices and asks, "Where are you going so late, master?" Cleo replies, "I'm off to greet an unwanted guest. You should rest. I'll see you tomorrow." As she leaves, Cleo mutters to himself, "I didn't think charms would work this well. Humans are so weak-minded." We see that Cleo is much older than he appears, using magic to disguise his true face. "It took me almost half a year to prepare everything to summon the demon, and now, just when I'm close to success, another hindrance shows up. Good thing I set up that detection barrier. I'll talk to them and send them away." He opens a door and says, "I found you. What are you doing here?" Cleo sees Karnak and Barrows in his home, seemingly robbing him. Barrows, caught off guard, says, "Didn't expect to get caught. You must be the young master of this estate, right? We heard you've been giving money to the townspeople. Maybe you can spare some for us." Cleo sighs, relieved. "Thieves? I was worried for nothing." Barrows and Karnak smirk. "Why are you laughing? Seems like you need to be taught a lesson." Cleo begins casting green magic, saying, "You're unworthy of becoming sacrifices." Before the spell could hit, Alias rushes in, blocking the attack with a spell from Hatoba. Cleo is shocked. "A holy spell?" Barrows grins. "Just as you said, my lord. Didn't think you'd reveal your identity so easily." Alias calmly adds, "This method has already been proven." Cleo realizes he's been too careless. Gritting his teeth, he mutters, "I have no choice. I'll have to kill you all here." He begins summoning undead creatures, ordering them to attack. A group of undead rushes toward Karnak, Barrows, and Alias. Alias says, "I'll buy you two some time with my authority." Karnak and Barrows are already running into battle, replying, "Understood, though I doubt we'll need it." Barrows charges in, swiftly taking down each undead on his side. Meanwhile, Karnak uses chaos mana to cast magic arrows, taking out the undead on his side with precision. Cleo, now furious, begins casting another spell. "It's a little early for this, but I have no choice." He opens a green portal, summoning a beast from the underworld. A red aura bursts out, crashing into the ground as a demon knight emerges. Cleo laughs. "Do you think you can handle this?" Alias stabs his staff into the ground, calling forth the light of Hatoba. "Holy dispel!" A bright yellow light floods the room, washing over them all. Cleo, surprised, asks, "A counter-summon?" The demon knight screams as the light envelopes him, "I can't disappear like this." He vanishes into the light, disappearing from the spot. Alias calmly says, "I knew what spell you'd try." Cleo glares at them. "You're not just some random group of intruders." Realizing he no longer needs to hide, Cleo begins transforming, his body swelling up, his clothes tearing apart. His aura fills the room as he grows to nearly 3 times his size, letting out a terrifying scream. Alias is shocked. "I didn't expect this. I don't have time to cast another spell." He tries to warn Karnak and Barrows, but they've already charged forward. Barrows leaps high, delivering multiple slashes across Cleo's massive body. Karnak follows up with magic arrows that pierce straight through Cleo's chest. In just seconds, Cleo is defeated. Alias stands frozen in shock, thinking, what just happened? Karnak stretches his arms casually. "Good practice." Alias, still in awe, says, "Your strength is impressive, but your teamwork is incredible." Barrows turns to Alias. "Should we kill him or let him live?" Alias replies, "I'll handle it." He begins casting a spell on Cleo's wounds with his staff. As he does, dark energy, Karnak's original mana, the darkness of the end, begins flowing out of Cleo's cuts. Alias, looking at the dark energy, says, "Just as expected." He sighs, wondering if he has to clean up the hallway. But before he can do anything else, Karnak places a hand on Alias's shoulder and channels his mana into him. Instantly, Alias falls into a deep sleep. Karnak says it's time for them to begin as well. As he starts absorbing the dark energy, Barrows asks if there's anything interesting. Karnak replies, "It looks like Cleo was always a necromancer, but he took the chance to absorb some of the darkness of the end." Barrows, intrigued, says, "That's tempting power. Anything else?" Karnak continues, "Cleo was also a member of a cult that worships someone called Tezranik." Barrows, curious, asks, "Who's Tezranik?" Karnak explains, "He's believed to be the god of death." Barrows, surprised, remarks, "I thought you were the god of death." Karnak chuckles, "Not exactly. According to the cult's teachings, Tezranik is the god of death and rebirth, someone who will purify the world through death and create a new paradise." Barrows comments, "There must be a reason for all of this, especially for people to believe in a god like that." Karnak nods, "You're probably right. That's all the useful information we got." Karnak then mentions he gained something else too, the ability to refine chaos mana with the power of a priest. Barrows asks, "So that's why you wanted to work with Alias, to test this out?" Karnak replies, "Yes. Chaos mana is purified and sealed necromancer energy. I wanted to see if I could purify more of it using divinity." Barrows laughs, "So this was all just an experiment for you?" Karnak smirks and hands a vial to the unconscious Alias, saying, "With this, his mana should have doubled. He should be as powerful as a fourth circle magician now." Barrows remarks, "It seems we'll need to keep an eye out for more holy artifacts." Karnak nods, suggesting they could steal some from the church if needed. They then wake up Alias, who's surprised and embarrassed that he fell for a trap. "I can't believe I let my guard down," Alias says, relieved that Karnak and Barrows were there. Karnak reassures him, "It all ended well, and the charmed townspeople should calm down with the church's help." Alias asks, "What will you two do now?" Karnak replies, "We'll head back to Durarth City to rest." Alias bids them farewell and gives them a blessing before they leave. As they walk away, Alias grows suspicious, thinking there's something strange about them and resolves to learn more later. Meanwhile, on the road back to the city, Karnak says, "Let's grab some food," which makes Barrows excited.
That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more manhwa recaps like this, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll stay updated with more content like this. Until next time.